1 year after burying her family, a woman is terrified to see them through the train window. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Laura was finishing her report when she received a phone call from the kindergarten teacher. "When are you coming to pick up Noah?" the teacher asked, obviously unhappy. "It's 8:30 p.m. We've been sitting in the playground with your son for an hour." "Mrs. Laura, I understand you're busy with work, but I've already finished my shift. I've been here since 8 a.m. and have spent the entire day with the kids because my colleague is on leave," the teacher said. "I'm sorry, I'm on my way." Laura immediately shut down her computer, closed the office, and hurried down the stairs while dialing her husband. "What are you doing?" she began scolding him as soon as he answered. "I asked you to pick up Noah today. I've been swamped at work trying to finalize a quarterly report, as you know," she said. "I don't have time for this right now, Laura," David said firmly. "We'll talk at home," and he hung up. Laura was left breathless with indignation. He doesn't have time to pick up his own son. He promised me this morning he'd handle it, and now he's not even talking to me. David and Laura had known each other since college. They had been married for about 7 years, and their son Noah was 4 years old. The couple was a typical family. They lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Laura worked as a data analyst at an employment agency, and David was an independent contractor. The family didn't have much money, but they managed. They lived harmoniously, but like any family, they sometimes had minor conflicts. That night, Laura and David had a small argument. "David, I was mortified by the teacher. You promised to pick up Noah. You could have at least told me you couldn't," she said. "You know what?" David replied bluntly. "I had a long day on a job site. Should I drop everything and rush to the school? Recently you were complaining about wanting to go on a summer trip or something like that." "I'm trying to save up," he said. "But you could have called me." "I forgot," Laura responded. David grew irritated, went to the kitchen, poured himself some coffee, and looked at his wife. "You could have at least made something for dinner. Your husband is hungry when he gets home," he said. "I'm hungry too, David," Laura explained. "I was busy today. So what if you make more money? Do you think I'm not working just as hard?" she said angrily. "Your income doesn't really matter," David replied, biting into a hastily made sandwich. "You think you're making a fortune. Why are you eating cold food? I'll reheat some leftovers. They taste better today anyway." "Then you eat them yourself," David snapped and left the kitchen, slamming the door of Noah's room. The boy was sitting at his desk drawing. David hugged his son and kissed the back of his neck. "Well, buddy, why did your mom pick you up so late today?" "Yeah," the boy said. "The teacher scolded us." "What a strict teacher you have," his father said. "Yeah." Laura overheard the conversation clearly. She wanted so badly to yell at David for trying to make it seem like it was her fault, but Laura decided to hold back her anger. It was better for everyone. She quickly made a salad and fried some potatoes. An hour later, the family gathered in the kitchen. The tension had melted away. Laura and David were quick to argue and quick to make up. "Laura, how about we spend the weekend out of town?" David suddenly suggested while eating salad. "Noah and I decided to relax and have some father-son time." "Where are you planning to go?" Laura was surprised. "We want to go camping in the woods," David said. "We'll pitch a tent and maybe even catch some critters for your mom, right, buddy?" "Hooray, let's go camping." "All right," Laura frowned. "But I don't think that's a good idea, David. It's still early fall, and it'll be cold at night in the woods. Noah could catch a cold, and frankly, it's risky." "What's risky?" "We'll stay near the trail, and it'll be fun," David said. "And what makes you think Noah will catch a cold? It's cool but not freezing. I'm not raising our son to be coddled. He's a tough little guy." "He's still small," she countered. When Noah realized his mother wasn't thrilled about the idea, he pouted, nearly crying. Laura began to comfort him, glaring at David for bringing it up. "David's right. It's not a big deal. Noah will have new experiences, and I'll take care of things at home alone on my day off." Fine, she relented. You can go, but promise me you won't wander too far. Of course, David promised, and Noah jumped with joy. Peace returned to the family. Laura stepped outside to watch her men leave and froze when she noticed the large camping gear and inflatable raft strapped to the roof of the car. What's that for? She asked David. You said you'd stay near the trail. I said we wouldn't go into the water, and we won't. Her heart clenched with anxiety, but she didn't want to argue with him again. She let them go with a kiss goodbye to Noah and watched their old green car drive down the road. She cleaned the house, washed the curtains, organized the closets. There was plenty to do. Every now and then, she called David to check in and spoke with Noah. Her son was thrilled. Mom, I found a frog, he exclaimed on the phone. It was so green and slimy. Wow, was it big? She asked. No, it was small. I let it go because I felt sorry for it. You did the right thing, son. Let it live, Laura agreed. That evening, after finishing all her chores, Laura anxiously checked the clock. It was already 8:30 p.m. She quickly put the chicken and potatoes in the oven because her hungry campers would be back soon. After placing the roast in the oven, she called David again, but his phone was unavailable. Maybe they're already on their way, she thought. But half an hour later, the phone was still unavailable. Her heart began racing. She kept calling non-stop, but there was only silence. Laura called the police. My husband and son haven't come home. I'm really worried, she said frantically to the on-duty officer, who yawned after listening to her confused explanation about the lack of contact and their being out of range. Don't worry. They'll be back soon, the officer replied dismissively. I have a bad feeling. They should have been back an hour ago. They're in the woods with a 4-year-old. What if something happened? Does your husband drink? No. Then why are you so worried? Can't a father handle taking care of his own child? She then asked. What if they had an accident? Next, she called emergency services. They quickly took her information, noted the coordinates, and said they'd send a search team. Laura prayed for everything to be okay. Soon she received a call. The tired voice of a man on the phone said that no one was found at the campsite, but they did find some camping equipment near a small stream. No one was there. Laura immediately rushed out, grabbed a taxi, and headed to the woods. Search teams were combing the area, and officers were patrolling with flashlights. It was already quite dark, and the air was chilly. Laura shivered from the cold or the fear of what was happening. What's going on? She asked the officers, clutching her hands. Nothing yet, an older officer said, lowering his gaze. We found a small fire and some belongings. Do these look familiar? Laura just stared, tears welling up in her eyes. The man held up Noah's favorite stuffed dinosaur and David's worn backpack. Then a rescuer shouted. He had found something downstream. Everyone rushed to the spot. Laura saw David's hat and Noah's small boots near the bank. She collapsed. Paramedics revived her, but the search was called off for the night. When Laura heard that, she screamed hysterically. No, what if they're still out there? But everyone just looked away. How could anyone survive in these conditions? They practically dragged Laura away from the scene. When she returned home, she collapsed on the couch. Until morning and then rushed back to the search site. Rescuers scoured every inch of the woods and the stream, but nothing was found. This is a tough area, the officer explained to Laura. The terrain is difficult, and the currents are swift. Why did they go near the water? He promised me they'd stay on the trail, Laura said desperately, her eyes locked on the stream. Why? No one could answer her. David and Noah were presumed dead after days of searching. No one doubted they had been swept away. The search was hindered by the rough terrain and fast currents. Eventually, Laura was told there was little hope of finding them. They were likely carried downstream, and it was just a matter of time before they'd be found. But Laura didn't believe them. She still held on to hope. After all, the car was never found. But a few days later, Laura received a call from the police. The car had been found abandoned at a gas station. It turned out to have been stolen and stripped. Laura was devastated. Just days ago, she had been a happy mother and wife, despite their occasional arguments. Now she was left with nothing. Laura couldn't even enter Noah's room because everything there reminded her of him. When she opened the closet, she immediately saw David's belongings. She was in agony. Laura cried like a wounded animal, and it seemed her tears would never end. Rosa, Laura's mother, was equally heartbroken over losing her son-in-law and grandson but held strong. She knew her daughter needed support, so she temporarily moved in with Laura. They endured those difficult days together. David had no close family, and there was no one left to mourn him. "Mom, it's all my fault," Laura said immediately. "If I had insisted, if I hadn't let them go camping that day, they'd still be alive." "Daughter, don't blame yourself," Rosa replied. "It wasn't your fault. It was David's for going near the water. He always did things his way. I was foolish to trust him with our son." Laura began to cry. "How can I live with this pain?" "Just take it slow. Your heart will heal, the pain will lessen." Rosa stroked Laura's head as she had when Laura was a child. Yes, the pain would lessen. It wouldn't go away but would hide deep within. David and Noah were never found. They were declared dead. Laura aged in spirit if not in appearance. Her soul turned cold. She no longer smiled and was indifferent to everything. Her life revolved around work and home, and every time she looked at her son's photo, it was like opening a fresh wound. Laura insisted her mother return home because she could manage on her own, but Rosa was worried. So she asked Amelia, Laura's best friend, to visit more often and take her out to help her move forward. Amelia knew this, so every weekend in the evening she visited. She suggested Laura take a vacation in the south for the summer. "I'm not going anywhere," Laura immediately replied. "I don't want to, and I don't have the money." "Money isn't an issue," Amelia said without hesitation. "You know my husband, and he's willing to cover it for me." "Amelia, why would you do this? You know what I'm going through. I don't want to live, and you're offering a vacation." "Laura," Amelia continued, "I already have 2 tickets. My friend had to cancel last minute, and if we don't go, the tickets will be wasted." "All right, let's go." Of course, Amelia was lying. She had asked her husband to buy the tickets, explaining why it was necessary. Alex, her husband, was understanding and generous, sincerely concerned for his wife's friend. So he bought the tickets. Laura refused for a while but eventually agreed because she realized Amelia wouldn't take no for an answer. First, they flew by plane. Then they took a train. At one of the stops, Laura decided to get some air. The train had stopped for about half an hour, giving her time to walk along the platform and take a break from Amelia's constant chatter. Laura valued their friendship, but sometimes her friend could be exhausting, especially during a long trip. She strolled along the platform, imagining herself lying in bed at the hotel, stretching out and just falling asleep. Laura planned to spend the entire vacation in her room. She would let Amelia enjoy the sun and the beach. Laura didn't want to see water again. The warmth of the sun would be enough for her. At best, she would walk around the town. Laura shivered as the electric locomotive horn blared, and a passenger train pulled in. She looked around and realized she had wandered far from her carriage and needed to hurry back before the train departed. Laura hurried back and suddenly saw a child in the window of the arriving train's carriage. The boy was curled up against the window, looking out at the station. Laura thought she was losing her mind. In the window she saw Noah. The woman screamed and ran to the carriage. The child was looking somewhere else, but when he turned his head, their eyes met. The boy raised his eyebrows in surprise. His lips trembled. "Noah!" Laura screamed as loud as she could. "My son, my dear, you're alive." Later, Laura would only vaguely remember what happened next. She pushed past the conductor who wouldn't let her in and nearly knocked over a passenger holding a cup of tea in the corridor. And there he was, her son, looking confused. "Yes, it's Noah, my son," she whispered. "Come to me." She held out her arms to him. The bewildered child sat still by the window, and Laura's legs gave way. She literally dropped to her knees. "Careful!" A sleepy voice called out from above. A man sleeping on the upper bunk had thrown off his blanket, revealing himself. Laura was stunned. It was David, alive and well, looking equally confused. "What are you doing here?" he finally asked. "What am I doing here?" she exclaimed. "David, I've spent a year thinking you were dead, and you, what is going on?" At that moment, the conductor returned with the train chief and a police officer. "Yes, it's her. I'm not sure what she wants with me and my son," David said coldly. "This is my son," Laura cried. "This woman is crazy. I don't know her," David insisted, handing over his documents to the train chief. They started dragging her away from the carriage, but then Noah, who had been silent the entire time, cried out, "Mama! Mama, you're alive. Papa said you were dead." No one knows how Laura found the strength, but she shoved the large conductor aside, ran to her son, grabbed him and held him tight. Noah wrapped his arms around her neck. Laura kissed his cheeks, eyes, and the top of his head. He was her son. "Oh boy. She's my mom," Noah cried out, tears streaming down his face. "I won't let anyone take me away." The police and train officials started realizing something wasn't right. Laura didn't seem mentally ill. There was a hearing. Laura, David, and Noah were taken to the police station. David was cursing loudly as they removed him from the train, but the officers decided to hear both sides. After the investigation, they found David's documents were fake, as was Noah's birth certificate. "How do you explain this?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. She still held Noah close. Though he had grown over the past year, Laura felt no difficulty. She was just happy he was alive. David slumped in his seat at the station. Realizing there was no point in denying it, he confessed. A few months before disappearing, David met a wealthy woman named Vanessa. She was 10 years older than him, but that didn't matter. She truly fell for him, and he was drawn to her wealth. They started an affair. Vanessa demanded David leave his wife and promised him a life of luxury. He was ready to leave Laura immediately but didn't want to lose Noah. He knew that Laura would likely get custody in a divorce. Vanessa didn't mind the child. In fact, she couldn't have children of her own. She came up with a plan to stage an accident during the camping trip. David took Noah to the woods, where they camped and drank hot chocolate. He drugged the drink with sleeping pills. Vanessa arrived, and they scattered some belongings near a stream. David placed the raft in the water and then overturned it. Then they left the site. Meanwhile, Vanessa tipped off some acquaintances about where they could easily steal a car and strip it. Noah was given false documents. They lived in a luxurious house for a year, and David reveled in the lifestyle. He told Noah that Laura had died and that they needed to leave quickly. The boy was miserable for nearly a year, constantly crying. Vanessa tolerated him but didn't care much for him. Recently, David decided to take Noah to a resort, even though they were already living near the coast. On their way back, fate led them to cross paths with Laura at that precise moment. It was as if something higher guided her to that platform at just the right time. David was arrested, and after the paperwork was processed, Laura and Noah were finally released. They wanted to send the boy to a shelter, but Laura remembered Amelia and her husband's connections. "Laura!" Amelia shouted when she heard her friend's voice on the phone. "Where are you? I had to get off the train, and I've been pacing the station for hours. I went to the police, and you were gone." "Amelia, I found them," Laura whispered. "Who did you find?" "I found David and Noah. They're alive." She briefly explained everything. Amelia sighed. "I'll kill him for this. But first, we need to make sure they don't take your son away during the trial." "I understand," Amelia replied. Alex had high-level contacts. She called him immediately. In short, Laura left the station with her son and Amelia, but they were heading home, not to the beach. They were happier than ever. When Rosa heard the story from Laura, she initially thought her daughter had gone mad. She had already decided the beach trip was a bad idea. But when she heard her grandson's voice, she almost fainted. Then she cried tears of joy. Everyone was alive. But the most important thing was that Noah was back with him. David was sentenced but received a reduced sentence thanks to Vanessa pulling strings. They were still living together, but Laura wanted nothing more to do with her ex-husband. He was no longer part of her life. She devoted herself entirely to raising her son. Noah soon began to forget everything that happened with his father and Vanessa, given his young age. He started school and made his mother and grandmother proud with his early academic achievements. Laura continued working at the employment center and occasionally stayed in touch with Amelia, who had recently married Alex and was preparing to move abroad. "Don't take too long to visit," Amelia told Laura. "We'll see you in Europe soon. We'll figure out your love life too." "I don't need anyone," Laura laughed. "I have Noah, and he's all I need to be happy in this life." Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.